Is that microphone on? It's on. Go ahead and turn it on. Ready? 10 seconds.
Hey there. Welcome to the November Georgia Tech Speaker Salon, TEDxGeorgia Tech Speaker Salon. My name is Raj Jaishankar. I have the honor of being the Executive Director of TEDxGeorgia Tech this year. First off, I want to thank all of y'all for tuning in from wherever you are. I know we have viewers and people who bought tickets from all around the world, and I appreciate y'all making the time to be here today. I also want to thank our speakers. We have 4 amazing speakers that worked very hard on their talks the past couple weeks to come here today and perform to a virtual audience, which is a whole new challenge that we as an organization, like many others this year, are facing. I want to thank our team. We have a large team of almost 40 people. We have about 20 people here with us today. Everybody's social distanced, wearing masks. I want to thank y'all for coming out to make this event possible, for taking on all the challenges that come with a virtual event, as well as our team that isn't in Atlanta and that's been working on marketing and community pushes and speaker outreach all over the world. Now, and I also want to thank the Tech Square Atlanta Social Clubhouse. Without them, we would not have this amazing venue. Now, our theme for this year, when we chose our annual theme, we want something that would encompass the challenges that many of us were facing over the past couple months when the COVID-19 pandemic started. And we went through a lot of different words, but what we settled on was a word that described both the uncertainty and the danger that this pandemic brought to us and that all of us are facing now with our everyday lives, but also the adventure and the sense of possibility and excitement that we had, both when we do everyday tasks and monumental tasks like putting on the Salon. And that word was embark. And to me, embark means that we may not be ready or prepared for whatever task we're taking on, whatever adventure we're going on, but no matter what it is, we're gonna get it done. And I think that's an ideal that this team really represents and our speakers today represent. And for that, I thank all of you. Now, I do, once again, I thank all of y'all for coming out today. I appreciate it. And without further delay, I want to introduce our first speaker. Kyandra Peart is a second-year mechanical engineering student here at Georgia Tech. And she's going to be talking about something that many pop culture shows and artists have tried to represent over the past over several decades, but they've never really gone to the point as well as she has today. And she'll be talking about the 4th dimension. So please give it up for Kyandra.
I, for one, have never really been a fan of physics. I took AP Physics in high school, and let me tell you, it was a struggle from day one. But what I've learned over the years is that physics can actually be interesting, with topics other than gravitational force and kinetic energy, of course. Physics can change the world. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why me, a 19-year-old mechanical engineering student, is here talking to you today. I might be underqualified on paper, but what I'm here to talk about does not require a degree to understand. All it requires is one severely obsessed student to explain it to you. And luckily for all of you, that's me. For some reason, it seems that Generation Z and millennials are obsessed with the idea of alternate dimensions or parallel universes. TV shows like Star Trek, cartoons like Rick and Morty, Marvel movies, all down to the run-of-the-mill teenage teen drama, have all slowly introduced these theories into the mainstream. Now, they're usually written off as fiction or fantasy, but there is a scientific basis to these types of stories. Maybe you're familiar with something called the Mandela effect. It's the idea behind what is a bunch of people from different countries and continents all remembering an event in history happening in a specifically certain way. However, when we look back into history and look at our documentation of said event, it seems to have happened in a completely different manner. For example, the Berenstain Bears, a popular kids' TV show and book series from the 80s. Now, most of the world recalls the spelling being the Berenstain Bears. Heck, even I recall that spelling. But when we look at every TV show aired and every book published, it seems to have always been the Berenstain Bears. Now, I would leave it up to a faulty memory, but most of the world agrees with me on this. So how can all of these people who have never met and have never connected before remember a false memory like this? Simple. Alternate dimensions. At least that's the consensus on Twitter. And you know what? There may be some truth to that theory. I mean, it's not that simple, but there are many things that suggest that alternate dimensions may exist. So there's plenty of theories created to explain these types of things, but the one I'm going to talk to you today about is the fourth dimension. How we can understand, visualize, and comprehend the fourth dimension, and why it's so difficult to do something like this. And hopefully after, you'll be able to explain the fourth dimension in a way that your little cousin and your grandma can all comprehend. So many of these TV shows and pop culture influences may depict dimensions as some faraway place you can visit with a spaceship. But to physicists and mathematicians, a dimension is really just a direction. So the first step in understanding dimensions is starting with our own. So as you know, we are 3D objects, meaning we have 3 dimensions or 3 directions. Height being the very important third dimension, alongside length, and width being the first and second. So as you can see, they're all perpendicular to each other, so I guess if we wanted to have a fourth dimension, it would have to be perpendicular to the last 3. But we don't have another direction or way to go to create this fourth axis. So how can the fourth dimension exist? Some people may be thinking, well, isn't time the fourth dimension? I mean, Einstein said so. And you know what? That's not a false statement. We can think of time like a spatial dimension. So in the first, second, and third spatial dimensions, you can tell one point in space from another and move forwards and backwards. And you can do the same thing with time, right? You can tell one point in time from another and move forwards, but not backwards. So time doesn't really work out to be like the other spatial dimensions. So it's not wrong to think of time like this. Rather, it's wrong to assume that time and spatial dimensions are the same thing. Now, this may be a little complex to understand, so we're going to leave our 3D worlds and go to the fascinating world of Super Mario. Have you ever seen an old-fashioned Mario game? His head is perpetually facing the right as he walks along the screen. Now, have you ever thought about what Mario sees? Well, he's a 2-dimensional character in a 2-dimensional world on a two-dimensional screen. So if we were to flip the screen so that we can see Mario's perspective, we would realize the only thing that exists are one-dimensional lines. These lines grow in size as objects get closer to him and shrink as they move farther away. So what does this mean? Well, this means that Mario cannot fully understand his two-dimensional existence. Even if he looked in the mirror, he would only see himself portrayed as a colorful one-dimensional line. So for us as humans, if Mario lives in 2D in season 1, and we live in 3D, then that must mean that we see in 2D. Many may just assume that, yeah, we're three-dimensional, so we see in 3D, but that's not necessarily true. Picture this. You're sitting in a train and you're looking outside the window. As you're looking outside the window, you fall asleep. And while you're sleeping, somebody replaces your window with a screen showing the exact same thing. Now, when you wake up, you would not be able to tell the difference. This basically goes to show that we really only see and comprehend 2 dimensions. Yes, we know of the 3rd dimension and can tell when there's height or depth, but actually being able to see that depth is not in our capabilities with our 2D understanding. So that would conclude that we as humans cannot fully understand our own 3-dimensional existence like Mario couldn't. Take a look at this block. We're all aware that this is in fact a cube, despite that from where I'm looking, all I see is a square. But when I turn it, I'll be able to see the other sides and essentially prove to myself that this is in fact a cube. Even you at home may only be seeing a square, yet somehow you know that this is a cube. This further proves that, yes, we know of the 3rd dimension, but actually being able to see it is not in our capabilities. So if we as humans are able to fully understand Mario's length and width, yet he's only able to understand the length, then that could conclude that there's some 4-dimensional creature that's able to understand our length, width, and height. That would mean that they can see the front, back, inside, and outside of 3D objects simultaneously. I mean, we have no idea what this would even look like. I guess we can picture a see-through object, perhaps, but even still, parts of your vision are blocked. Like this glass. I can see to the other side of the glass, but I'm not actually seeing the other side. In fact, it's impossible in our world to do so. Another way to think of dimensions is through shadows and projections. So, as you can see, the shadow of 3D objects are 2D objects or 2D projections. So that would imply that the shadow of 4-dimensional objects would be entire 3D objects or 3D projections. So take a square. A square is 2-dimensional. If we expand that square along the 3rd dimension, we get a cube. Expand that cube along the 4th dimension, and we get something called a tesseract or a hypercube. Now, if you saw Avengers, you may be familiar with the term tesseract, but no, not that type of tesseract. A tesseract is a 4-dimensional object that, because it's 4-dimensional, we're not able to visualize it, but we can see its 3-dimensional projection. Now, the image of its projection may be a little confusing to look at first glance, so we're going to break it down for a second. Take a look at this hollowed cube. As you can see, the shadow on the wall changes as the cube rotates. The biggest square on the wall is the face closest, and the smallest square on the wall is the face furthest. As it rotates, the squares trade places. The biggest square becomes the smallest, and the smallest square becomes the biggest. Now, the same thing in the 4th dimension. If we were to rotate a 4-dimensional tesseract in 4D space in a similar fashion to the cube, it would look something like this. Notice how the entire cubes get bigger and smaller in of themselves, just how the squares did. I mean, this is fascinating geometry. Think about all the other shapes that can be created through 4-dimensional analysis. 4-dimensional objects move in ways that are unheard of. I mean, they morph in size and shape and disappear and reappear in ways we've never seen. So, if we can think of Mario one more time, this is the last time, I promise. So Mario can actually see multi-dimension objects. I mean, if a two-dimensional square was to intersect Mario's two-dimensional plane, it would be seen to Mario in his one-dimensional understanding and look like a line. Now, if it was slightly to the left or to the right of Mario's plane, he would not be able to see it at all. He's only able to see it as it intersects as a one-dimensional cross-sectional line. So I guess we can say the same thing for the fourth dimension. If a four-dimensional cube or hypercube was to intersect our three-dimensional plane, it would look exactly the same as a regular 3D object. Now, if a cube was to intersect Mario's two-dimensional plane, it would look exactly the same as the square did and be seen in his one-dimensional understanding and look like a line. Now, Mario might be scared or confused, being that this object keeps disappearing and reappearing in ways that he's never seen before. In the past, lines have only gotten longer and shorter, depending on if objects have gotten closer and farther away from him. So, what does this mean? This means that all objects can be seen from all planes, but in different forms. So, if a four-dimensional hypercube intersected our three-dimensional plane, it would look exactly the same as a regular 3D object, but it would move in ways that we've never seen before, disappearing and reappearing, morphing in size and shape. So, if we can look at this cube and see that it can enter multiple 2D planes at the same time, then the same thing can be said for the hypercube. The hypercube can enter multiple 3D planes simultaneously. So, if we can think of 2D planes like pieces of paper stacked up against each other in the third direction of height to create our three-dimensional space, then there should exist some fourth dimension that allows 3D space to be stacked into to create it. This fourth dimension or fourth direction that 3D space can be stacked into would create what is known as four-dimensional space. Now, when we think of stacking 3D spaces, we know we just get a larger 3D space. And when Mario thinks about expanding his worlds, he can only imagine a bigger computer screen. So we have no idea, once again, what four-dimensional space would look like. So there should be some next direction that allows 3D space to be stacked into to create four-dimensional space. Now, this theory would imply that there can be multiple 3D worlds that coexist without interdimensional interaction. This would mean that there can be multiple 3D universes that exist in our one universe. This is the basis of parallel universes. Multiple 3D worlds coexisting, possibly being copies of each other with different histories. Now, the fourth dimension can explain some of the most perplexing things in the world. I mean, people who have claimed to see ghosts or extraterrestrial creatures claim that one second they were there and the next they were gone, disappearing and reappearing almost instantaneously. Now, what if it was just a four-dimensional creature intersecting our 3D plane for a brief moment before moving on to the next? I mean, it sounds crazy, but if you think about it, we do it all the time. Anytime we move through space, we're just moving through an infinitesimal amount of 2D planes stacked in our third direction of height to create our dimension. Now, not to get too sciencey, but string theory, aka the theory of everything, which basically explains the fundamentals of our universe, like gravity, predicts that there are 10 spatial dimensions. I mean, surely the fourth dimension is stacked in some fifth direction to create a fifth dimension, and so on. I mean, the possibilities are endless. In addition, scientists have found this force called dark energy. It's constant everywhere in time and space, which doesn't make sense in our 3D world. One way to support higher dimension theories is through finding the source of forces like this. If there's a force acting between these unseen parallel universes, it could be explained through dark energy. So I hope by now you have a better understanding of the fourth dimension. I hope to have expanded your mind outside of our confined 3D space. While string theory and dark energy could be TED Talks on their own, I encourage you to explore these topics on your free time. These were not the things I was learning while in my AP Physics class, but I think equally as important and definitely more intriguing. And the best part is, it doesn't require a degree to understand. All it requires is one severely obsessed student to explain it to you. And now, that can be you.
All right. Thank you to Kyandra for that talk. I personally, that's one of the best explanations of the fourth dimension that I've heard or read. Now, moving on to our next talk. One of the challenges of organizing the salon virtually was that we had to accommodate virtual speakers. So it's my pleasure to introduce Sajjad Kader, who's speaking from Virginia. He's a second-year CS major here at Tech. All of us have felt that creative urge to kind of create something, to do something. And Sajjad is going to tell us about his experiences with that and how he embarked on that adventure. Now give it up for Sajjad.
I'm going to start off this talk asking you all to ponder over a couple of questions. Basically, really think deeply and see if you'd answer yes or no to these questions. Since quarantine, how many of you have felt that life is boring? How many of you have felt that you're doing nothing with your life? Now, I'm sure most of you said yes to both of these questions, and to be honest, I was feeling the same way. Just like most of you, I was feeling there was nothing to do anymore, nowhere to go, and no one to see. I mean, this past summer, I was supposed to be rocking it in Seattle, exploring the city, quote unquote, living the life. But here I was, bored, alone, not even allowed to go outside or see my friends. And before I get too deep into my talk, I guess I should introduce myself, my background a little bit. So I'm a second year at Georgia Tech, and high school isn't that far behind me. And the thing about me, just like most of you, throughout high school, I worked really hard to get good grades. I recall pulling those all-nighters for those AP chemistry or world history exams, and at the end of the day, I'd say I was pretty successful. I mean, I got the good grades. And so seeing my hard work being put into good use and seeing an immediate result was always very gratifying. And coming into college, working just about as hard, it felt the same way. I mean, add in a new dimension with careers and internships, but overall, it was pretty much clockwork. But the thing is, all this time, I began to feel a sense of monotony. Studying for exam after exam for that short-lived feeling of happiness, all I really found myself making time for was school. I never really sought fulfillment through anything else. I noticed something was off, but the thing is, this feeling was reinforced by everyone who kept telling me how I was one of the smartest people they knew, or how I was talented just for being able to maintain lasting academic success. But I felt like there was more for me to do, more that I really wanted to do. I wanted to break out of this monotonous cycle and explore something I hadn't really made time for before. My creativity. So fast forward to this past March when we were all sent home. Now, this was a weird time for me, and I'm sure all of you can relate. I was super lazy, and in efforts to gain some motivation, I started watching motivational speeches. And amongst all those speeches, one line that stood out to me the most from all of them was, if it's not gonna matter in the next 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it. Okay, that sounds cool and all, but for me, this was actually pretty problematic because all I had been doing was worrying and stressing over things that don't necessarily matter in the next 5 years. My life was centered around working from one accomplishment to the next. I was worried and stressed over each interview, each exam, and to a certain amount that's fine, but that started to occupy my life centrally. If it's not going to matter in the next 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it. So I began thinking, what does really matter in the next 5 years? And I kept thinking. While focusing on one accomplishment after the other, I had neglected a side of myself that I never really made time for before. And in trying to explore this, I found myself turning to public figures, especially those who influence so many others. How did they do this? I realized they accomplished this by tapping into their creativity and putting a lot of hard work into something very meaningful to them. These people are inspirations. They work really hard at their craft, and then they use it as a platform to then motivate others. As a result, I decided this was the path I wanted to take down. Finding a way to have a creative outlet to impact as many people as possible, help them, inspire them to achieve the best versions of themselves. But how could I do this? I mean, I'm no public figure. I'm not a pop artist or a professional NBA player. I mean, I have a pretty strong karaoke game, but it's definitely not my forte. Although, what I am pretty good at is public speaking. I mean, I'm giving a pretty good TED Talk right now, right? So then I thought, how can I use this skill to achieve my goal? And after giving it some thought, I did what I naturally did when I didn't know something. Search it up on YouTube. So then, ironically, it hit me. YouTube. I could become a YouTuber. Making YouTube videos would be a great way for me to explore that creative side of myself while reaching a large enough audience who could benefit from my hard work. So, what about content? Was I going to become the next David Dobrik and put a python in my friend's car as a prank? Maybe, but probably not. Like I said before, I was focusing a lot on school. I had made that essentially a way of life, and I was really good at this stuff. I knew for a fact that I would be able to share a thing or two, whether it's simple things like how to get into college or how to pass an interview. That would be my content. And the best part about all this is I could share it from the comfort of my own home. All I had to do was sit down in front of my desk with the camera on and start talking. And at first, I had a few reservations about this. Was it really worth it? Who would even watch my videos? Am I cool enough? But I decided to let all these thoughts subside. Like I said before, I was sort of restructuring my life, trying to find that thing that really matters to me. I then realized, regardless of who watched my videos, making them was helping me explore my creativity. So even if I'm able to impact only one person, and that one person goes on to do excellent things in life, that's what matters in the next 5 years. I decided I'm not going to produce YouTube videos for the fame of it, but rather just as a means of helping others while giving myself an outlet to express my creativity. Now, I'm sure y'all are wondering how it's been going. Thus far, it's been pretty fun and successful. I realize I have a lot to share in my life, but most importantly, I've been able to find that thing that matters to me in the next 5 years, exploring my creativity while helping so many others. I take a fun and energetic approach to my videos, having the audience laughing and engaging as I'm delivering a certain topic. Also, by focusing on my creativity, I've been able to achieve my goal of having impact. So many people have told me how my videos have helped them when it comes to their resume or interviews, whether it's teaching them how to make a proper LinkedIn headline or helping them gain confidence in themselves. Just reading the joy of a friend's text message saying that my video helped them getting their internship is very fulfilling. It reinforces my belief that focusing on something greater than the monotony of day-to-day life activities was definitely worth it. But the thing is, it's not just about me. None of this would have happened if I hadn't dived deep and really thought about how to restructure my values and perspectives. Instead of sitting at home doing nothing, I decided to reconsider what I value in life. I mean, we're all college students, and I have a strong feeling, a very, very strong feeling, that most of you focus on building yourselves in the career and academic spheres. I mean, rightfully so, this stuff is important. But I want you guys to try to take a different perspective. Make time for your creative pursuits. The next time you find yourself bored with life, find that impactful, creative person within yourselves, whether that be an artist, author, or anything else. Because the world needs more people like that. The world needs more people who have values and interests greater than their own day-to-day life activities. Get out of this monotonous cycle and push yourselves to the greater high. At the end of the day, what are you going to end up losing? Time? Time that you're already wasting? Energy? Energy that you're already putting into nothing? This is something that we have to value. Now let's get creative.
Thank you to Sajad. I think that talk was really relatable for all of us. So now, moving on to our third talk. This guy is one of the most charismatic and comedic speakers that I've ever worked with. His name is Dennis Goldenberg. He is a second-year math major here at Tech, and he's gonna be speaking on that feeling of uncertainty that we all always feel at sometimes. And he's gonna talk about why that's not such a bad thing. So please, give it up for Dennis.
Take a look at these motivational posters. You might recognize them from grade school or something like them. Interesting. You know, these words make me feel good. Never say never. Everything you need is already inside. You know what we should do with these? Throw them in the garbage. Because let's take a look at the words used in these posters again. Everything you need. Never say never. The problem is, they're complete absolutes. Never say never. I think it's okay to say never sometimes. I mean, I'm never going to eat a spider, and I think that's okay. And if everything I need is already inside, why would I study, exercise, do anything to better myself? It's almost like these motivational posters and quotes are designed to make us feel better about ourselves because of how certain they are. And because we, as people, are so insecure and unsure of everything, they don't ask us to accept any hard truths, but instead give us false validation. Now, if you're a college student like myself, you'll probably recognize some of the following rhetorical questions. Will my major be the right one for me? How do I balance school, sleep, and a social life? Or it could be as simple as, what would be the best thing to eat for lunch today? These questions rattle around my head constantly, and honestly, sometimes some false validation can be nice. Yet for the 19 years in my life, I've never been able to give a concrete answer to a single one of them, and it's certainly not due to a lack of thinking. These questions and my uncertainty in answering them illustrate the concept of uncertainty. Merriam-Webster defines uncertainty as a lack of sureness about someone or something. But as I was reading the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, by Mark Manson, I realized something. Uncertainty doesn't just mean lack of sureness, because personally, I don't think that that definition does the word justice. Here would be my definition for it. The foundation of human motivation. Now, before you look askance at me and tell me I'm crazy, know that I'm a math major who's experienced in proving logical statements. So with this, here is what we're going to try to prove today. Acting upon uncertainty implies human motivation, or a motivation to be better. What we're going to try to prove with this statement is that when acting in uncertain situations, you might encounter embarrassment or failure, but that very embarrassment or failure can serve as the motivation for self-improvement. However, as any good math major knows, we need some tools and definitions in order to be able to progress from one step to the next to complete our proof. And while I'm in no way sponsored by this book, 2 quotes in it stood out as applying directly to our proof. 1, the avoidance of suffering is a form of suffering. And 2, don't just sit there, do something, the answers will follow. So today, we're going to take an in-depth look at each of these statements and apply them to our proof. And maybe, just maybe, we will be able to answer some of the rhetorical questions about your and my future. Now, I want you to raise your hand if there is something ordinary in life, be it sleeping, eating, running, working out, etc., that you just sat and told yourself, I'm just not going to be good at this. I see some raised hands, me too. But for me, that thing was dancing. When I was little, I felt that I had 2 left feet. So I did my best not to dance in front of anyone. And I did my best not to think about it either. But that proved difficult when I went to a regional dance competition to support one of my dancer friends and saw how other people could move, how with unflinching confidence they danced in front of everyone. And me being the raging narcissist, my thought process went a little something like this. Wow, can they dance? Too bad that'll never be you, Dennis. But why? Right, because you're too scared to dance in front of anyone and get judged. But that sucks. Yeah, but you can't dance, so you shouldn't. Right? And I remember being so frustrated with myself that I couldn't dance. And I had to just slouch in the corner at any social events, watching other people enjoy themselves night after night. But about a year after the dance competition, I was invited to a friend's birthday party. Now, this friend's parents had rented out a clubhouse, and there was a dance floor, and people were, well, dancing, and it looked like fun. And I momentarily forgot why I don't let myself dance. On a whim, enchanted, I just rushed into the middle of the dance floor and joined in. You want to know something? It was fun. I know. Crazy, right? But I had fun, and I wasn't laughed out of the room. And then I realized in that moment that with all of the mental gymnastics I was doing in my own brain to justify never dancing, that process was more painful than actually growing some nards and just doing it. So I've been dancing ever since. Onus on the dancing. I never said I was good at it, okay? So you can't expect, not the point. But all kidding aside, I'm certain that there is something in each and every one of your lives that's analogous to what dancing was for me. And whatever that thing is, whatever thing you're purposefully trying to avoid for fear of embarrassment or failure, stop and think. Does avoiding this thing, does going out of my way to avoid this thing really make sense? And is the comfort in the certainty of failure at this thing really better than the uncertainty of possibly getting better? You see, in my opinion, uncertainty in success is far more worthwhile than certainty in failure. Therefore, you must face the embarrassment, or in my case, dance in front of it head on, rather than trying to avoid it and still suffering. Restated, that means you must act in the face of an uncertain situation. Or in other words, don't just sit there, do something. The answers will follow. When I read this, it was jarring because we've been taught the exact opposite for most of our lives. In school, you study and then you take the test, not the other way around. Ergo, you need the answers to take action. However, as I've discovered, outside the scope of the classroom, this process is often reversed. And ironically enough, a great example of this is my personal growth in public speaking. In 8th grade, I was tasked with giving a speech about why I should be student forum president in front of our entire 8th grade class. Now, I had implanted into my mind that I had to be extremely funny or I had no shot, regardless of the content, because as anyone knows, any student body election at that age is just a popularity contest. So I came up with this joke for the end of my speech, and I had no idea whether it was going to be funny, whether it would help me win the election or not, or even if it made any sense at all. And in the week leading up to the speech, I remember being racked with the struggle of telling it or not telling it. And at the very last moment, as I was giving the speech, in fact, I decided, why not? And I went for it. Okay. In a feeble attempt at showing humility, I decided to state how I only had 3 friends. And to illustrate that point, I decided to draw little faces on my fingers and yell, "The gang's all here." You feel that? The cringe? The silence? Yeah. The next week was just shame and embarrassment. I was the butt of every joke that week. To be fair, though, I did look like this, so you know, fair is fair. However, instead of giving in and telling myself, you know, I'm just not going to be good at public speaking for fear of embarrassment, I decided to use this mistake as fuel. So when I entered Lasseter High School, go Trojans, I decided to join speech and debate. And through long hours spent working on numerous speeches, I was able to eventually formulate what had went wrong in that 8th grade speech. Humor should complement content, not replace it. And this lesson and the work I put in to learn it got put to the test immediately at graduation, as I was scheduled to give a commencement speech. Oh, the nerves that day were intense, as my 8th grade failure replayed in my mind. I remember being introduced, going up to the podium at an amphitheater at Kennesaw State University, now facing a crowd of 2,000 as opposed to 200 years prior. I expected the butterflies, the nerves, the anxiety to swell up. Never came. I remember being on that stage and engaging the audience because my focus was on content this time. And because my humor was complimentary, I, believe it or not, even got them to laugh a few times. But had I hesitated way back when and not told that joke, I probably wouldn't have learned that lesson. Ergo, my moment of acting at my point of greatest uncertainty became my fuel to be a better public speaker because of the failure of that joke to land and my losing of the election. And that very mistake became the reason I gave an improved commencement address. And as a matter of fact, it's the reason I'm standing in front of all of you today talking about it. So had I had the chance to go back and redo, I wouldn't change a thing. Because uncertainty holds us back from going for it all for fear of the consequences, yet it's those consequences that often catalyze self-improvement. Now, we have the tools to complete our proof. First, when you act upon uncertainty, you might face possible embarrassment or failure. But as we've learned, the avoidance of this embarrassment or failure is a form of embarrassment or failure itself. So you should act and face it head on. Then, when facing this possible embarrassment or failure, if you subscribe to the idea that you do something and the answers will follow, you can use this embarrassment as motivation to be better, as motivation to improve. Hence, acting upon uncertainty implies human motivation. Now, how does this proof answer our rhetorical questions, you might ask? Well, I'm sorry to have strung everyone along for so long, but it actually doesn't. You probably will never have 100% certainty that you've answered all or any of your rhetorical questions correctly, and if you can't answer them, then I certainly can. And as a matter of fact, if I even try, I just become an animated version of those motivational posters I was mocking earlier. So that would be hypocritical. But to put a finer point on this proof, let me leave you with an anecdote about how it applied to my personal life. Recently, I was walking a friend back home to her dorm. And she turned and told me, and I'm not saying this to brag, but she said, "You know, a lot of the jokes you tell are pretty funny." And you know what I told her in response? The truth. I have simply run out of unfunny jokes to tell. And for God's sakes, I was talking to my fingers, guys. So it was bad. But that's the point. The point is that I didn't know. I was uncertain whether my jokes would be funny. So I told them. And when I did and bombed, embarrassing myself, that became motivation for me to become funnier. And that's how powerful acting upon uncertainty can be. So my advice is to never answer your questions with 100% certainty. Instead, embrace the uncertainty of your own path and use it as fuel to grow and strive and get better. And if you're going to leave this with anything, let it be this. Embrace the uncertainty of life, then act because of it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. And I gotta say, buddy, those are some of the best dance moves I have ever seen. Now, before we go to our final speaker, I want to take a moment to talk about why I joined this organization. It was essentially because I believed in the power of ideas as much as the rest of my team does. That's why we all joined this organization. But the thing about an idea is that they don't work unless you talk about them. And that's kind of part of what the goal of TED and TEDxGeorgia Tech is. I want all of you to take your ideas and take the ideas that you learned about today and go to your friends and family and peers and talk about them. And because in today's climate and with all the challenges that we face, it's only through discussing new ideas and innovating and collaborating with one another that we're going to solve any problems. So my challenge to you is to talk about these ideas. Have open discussions about them. You're not going to like or agree with some of the ideas that you hear, but if it's an idea worth hearing, it's worth learning from. And I know I believe that. My team believes that. That's why we pour our time and effort into this organization. And with that being said, I want to introduce our last speaker. David Espinal is a fourth-year biomedical engineering major here at Tech, and he is going to be talking about how he found purpose and made his own purpose despite all his struggles. So give it up for David.
Existentialists believe that there is no inherent meaning in life, that we are cast out into a purposeless universe and forced to exist, to suffer, to enjoy, and to live without meaning. To them, there is no God that created the universe, and there is no inherent truth to the universe. Absurdist philosopher Albert Camus once said, "The meaning of life is whatever keeps you from killing yourself." However, I find this rather bleak philosophy strangely comforting. You see, in his quote, Camus was not referring to a meaningless life as having so little purpose and so little use that one should simply kill themselves. Instead, Camus meant that in a meaningless universe, one's life can be used to create meaning. That one's purpose is not meant to be found, but sought. There's a strange amount of liberation that comes with thinking of life as having no inherent purpose. With no inherent purpose, one is free to do as they choose, to take control of their lives and to create something beautiful. Getting into Georgia Tech was a dream. All of the work that I had done throughout my years of high school had paid off. I had made it, mission accomplished. Yet, as my senior year came to a close, I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And when I got to college, it just kept getting worse. You see, the rigid structure of high school gave me some sort of purpose without really having me wonder what my ultimate goal in life was. I was a model student because my only real goal was to get into a good college. And once here, my only goal became get a good job. But the paradox of choice left me paralyzed. Depression can have a lot of root causes, but for me, it was the paralyzing purposelessness of being. Simply existing, living, but without meaning. Existentialists would call this the absurd. As humans, we are creatures that need meaning, or at the very least, we naturally seek it. But to an existentialist, there is none to be found. We are simply cast out and forced to live in a universe that is ultimately indifferent to our existence. I should mention now that I don't actually believe in this. While a feeling of purposelessness contributed to my depression and to an extent my worldview, the lesson that I want to teach you all today is that even in the darkest of philosophies, light is to be found. You see, existentialism does not live in a vacuum. Existentialism is an answer to essentialism. Essentialists believe that everything has an essence, including us, and that we have it before we're even born. And in order to be the best version of ourselves as human beings, we have to find it. If existentialism is a choose-your-own-adventure game, essentialism is more of a linear plot with set goals and challenges to overcome. But this can limit us because there are countless authorities telling us what our purpose should be. Parents, the government, the company you work for me, that was high school. But to an existentialist, there is nothing to be given. This past summer was rough on all of us. Personally, I got COVID-19, and my father was diagnosed with a brain tumor. There were times when things really felt hopeless, and that the suffering we were all going through was meaningless. But what the bleakest philosophy can tell you is that even without meaning, there is still hope. However, it doesn't take a summer in hell to figure out how to make your purpose. Though I do think that 2020 just might qualify for all of us. I now have a concrete goal to become a physician's assistant. And for for the first time in a long time. A vision to get there. What it really takes is a question to reframe your perspective, a seed from which hope will grow. What is my purpose? And if you trust that there is meaning, good, find it. But if you don't, then make it. Make purpose. Either way, there can be an answer. But it is up to you to respond to the universe. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, David, for closing us out. And with that being said, we are now done with our November Student Speaker Salon. Before all of y'all log off, I want to take a moment to once again thank our amazing speakers that spoke tonight, thank the organizing team that put a lot of hard work and effort into this. Also want to take a moment to go ahead and plug our future events. We have a speaker salon in January. It's going to be focused on women speakers. So please, if you are looking to speak, go ahead and look on TEDxGeorgiaTech.com and you'll find the application there for January. And if you're going there, go ahead and subscribe to our social media, Instagram, Facebook, to stay updated on all our future events. With that being said, thank you so much for coming. Make sure to take away the lessons and ideas you've heard about tonight and talk about them with your friends, families, peers, whoever, and go forward with them. Thank you very much, and have a good night.